Hey guys, Sally here. Thanks for dropping by. I've got an interesting subject for you, I think, today, and I'm calling this Potty Mouth, not because I'm gonna be like cursing or swearing or anything like that, although I've been accused of doing it before, but because I'm going to be talking about all of the pros and cons that I can think of the different potential potty systems used by full-time nomads. And it's something that a lot of people don't talk about like all at once. It gets kind of portioned out differently. I've been camping with a couple other people over the past few days, and we had this discussion, which, by the way, is another thing about being a nomad. You don't see people sitting around in their sticks and bricks and talking about the merits of different toilet systems. Just saying. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with all the info. Okay, so there are a couple of different ways to be able to handle potty business. And I'm going to start with one that is universally available to pretty much everybody, and that's the bucket. Whether it's a 5-gallon bucket or a 2.5-gallon bucket, or a fancier looking bucket with a built-in toilet seat, the basic premise is all the same. You're going to line it with a plastic bag. You're going to use some kind of absorbent, like kitty litter or paper pellets or pine pellets, although I have a recommendation from somebody that uses a bucket, and they say paper pellets are not your best choice. Pine pellets are your best choice, and they're often sold as horse pellets at places like Tractor Supply, farm supply places, that kind of thing. So there's that tip. There are some pros to having a bucket. One of them is that it's really cheap and it's pretty easy. You don't need any power to be able to run it, and you don't need any water to be able to run it. But there are some cons too. It's a bucket. You might spill stuff. And then the issue also can be disposal. Can be a little more difficult to dispose of. Most people will just double bag or use heavier bags and then, put it in a trash can. The theory being that, people are bagging their kids' dirty diapers all the time and throwing them in the trash, and nobody complains about that. Storage can be an issue if it's not collapsible, especially if you're in, a really small vehicle like a minivan or even a car. And then one of the other things to think about is if you don't have a self-contained, typically accepted toilet system, you may not be allowed in RV parks at all. So a couple of things to think about, both pros and cons. One of the other methods that's really popular, because it saves water, is a composting toilet. Now, there are a couple of different kinds of composting toilets out there for the RV community, and I would say do a lot of research to decide which one might be right for you. And I'm going to share some experience again from a friend of mine that is camping with me currently with a composting toilet. So some of the overall pros are you don't have to mess with a black tank, and that means that you can extend the time that you're available to stay off grid. Now, some composting toilets are easier to deal with than others, and I personally don't have any experience with them, but I have several friends that have had both kinds. And the consensus seems to be that the OGO is actually much easier to deal with. The Nature's Head has a pretty significant problem from my perspective, and from my friend's perspective that is currently using a Nature's Head, which is they're pretty heavy. And in order to empty the composting portion, you have to remove the entire toilet and carry it outside. Now, to me, that's not convenient, it's not easy, and the older we get, I think the more difficult that will become. And in fact, to the point where you could wind up, as another friend of mine has said, with an expensive $1,000 bucket. Once again, you got to think about the disposal a little bit. As I understand, most people do just bag it up and put it in a dumpster. And they can be messy to maintain, especially the Nature's Head, again, seems to be more difficult to maintain than the OGO, and I don't have any experience that I've talked about with anybody for other brands. So if you've got other brands that you know about, leave some comments down below and let us know. And then kind of the next iteration, which is really, I think, the most common for people that have travel trailers and motorhomes, is a standard RV toilet with a black tank. Now, one of the pros with that is that it's a built-in solution everybody's familiar with. There's no thinking involved, and it's simple and easy to use as a toilet. But the cons can be that you really should be using special toilet paper, or alternatively, which most people really subscribe to that are full time, don't flush your toilet paper, period. And in that case, you can use whatever toilet paper you want. Another con is just dealing with the whole black tank thing. You have to drain it. Then you really need to flush it on a fairly regular basis. You do use a lot of water in order to avoid the dreaded poop pyramid. And if you don't know what that is, I mean, basically, you do your thing, you open the valve, and if you don't have enough water with each flush, your stuff will drop straight down, and then the next time it'll drop straight down. And if there's not enough water to get it dispersed throughout the black tank, just imagine you could end up with a pyramid that could reach all the way up to your valve, depending on what kind of toilet black tank situation you have. In any event, one of the big problems with the poop pyramid is that it actually hardens. You lose a lot of capacity, and it becomes much more difficult to drain your tank. And then you really do need to flush your black tank on a fairly regular basis. I mean, I flush mine pretty thoroughly about every third or fourth time that I dump, which also means that, it takes a while to do that, and I need to be able to be in a place where I can use the time and have the water available to do it. The other disadvantage to a standard toilet is that it really limits the time that you can spend off-grid, and I'm going to speak specifically about my circumstances. And this is part of the reason I'm doing this video today, by the way, because I keep thinking about alternatives. My circumstances, and I probably don't have the numbers exactly right, so I'll put them on the screen if I got them wrong. I think I've got 35 or 36 gallons of fresh water. I've got 32 gallons of black and 28 gallons of gray. Now, I also think that the inlet from my freshwater tank to my water pump is set up higher than would be ideal from the bottom of the tank. So I lose some fresh water capacity because it's not going to suck anything out of there that's below the level of the water pump inlet. So that's something to think about as well. And what I find is I can typically go 2 weeks without needing to flush my black tank or drain my gray tank. But I can't do that with my freshwater tank. The most I've been able to get, being super, super conservative, has been about 10 days. And that's really with only maybe 2 showers in a 10-day period. Not the worst thing, though. I mean, I clean up other ways. That's a whole different subject. But those are some things to think about in terms of the conventional flushing toilet. And then there's a fourth alternative, which I haven't really seen a whole lot talked about, and I don't have a whole lot of info for you, but I've done some investigating online, and I just want to throw this out there because it was one of the things that I was considering. I've crossed it off my list of choices at this point. But that's an incinerating toilet. So one of the big pros about it is it's got the least amount of mess to deal with in terms of any of the other choices. Doesn't use any water whatsoever. And so that solves some of the black tank consuming my freshwater issues. And apparently you only incinerate after 4 flushes. Nobody was real clear about what happens with number 1. I assume it gets incinerated with number 2, but I wasn't real clear about that from my research. But there are some cons associated too, and the 2 biggest ones is that power is a concern. They can be run either from propane or from electric, and there are issues with both of those, at least for me with my particular setup. If I wanted to install an incinerating toilet where my conventional flush toilet is currently and eliminate my black tank, I would also need to drill a hole through my RV in order to be able to vent it. And I'd have to figure out some way to be able to get power to it, either propane or electric. All of that would be pretty expensive and pretty inconvenient, not even counting the price of the toilet itself, which from my research online is typically $3,000 to $4,000. So pretty expensive. And then the other con from my perspective, and I did a fair amount of research on this, not a ton, but a fair amount. The use of an incinerating toilet in an RV is not terribly well understood by the masses or in common usage at this point. And I think a toilet is something I do not want to be an early adopter on. So I'm curious, what method do you use when it comes to dealing with your stuff? Is it a bucket? Is it a composting toilet? Is it a conventional RV toilet? Or do you have an incinerating toilet? Or number 5, do you have some other method of doing this that we haven't talked about? Let me know in the comments down below. Hey, thanks for hanging out with me. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe, hit that thumbs up button, and always remember to sally forth, live your best life, go out and adventure in whatever way works for you.